need to make like the first banquet to then invite to the second one?
To invite Haman, or it's just there should be a second banquet?
That there's needed a second banquet.
Why not just do it at the first banquet?
Yeah.
So I think part of the reason is that she wanted the king to become suspicious of Haman. Why is she inviting Haman to our party? Why is she doing that? And people in power are often worried about those who are close, those who have a lot of authority under them, that they're creating their own power base. They're creating their own following, and that they won't take orders and then could rebel. That's why Stalin used to kill all of his close advisors every 10 years. He just murder them because they're getting too much independent power. So she, and I think she was successful because when Haman comes in at night, and the king says, "What should be done for the man whom the king wants to honor?" And Haman says to himself, "Who would the king want to honor more than me? Obviously, I'm the one." And he goes with this extravagant description of the honor. The king knows he's going to think that. And the king knows that it's going to be the opposite of what he thinks. And it's going to be a big come down. So the king is planning. He planned this.
So he's playing with Haman.
Yes, he's playing with Haman.
Wow.
I think that's right. And
Yeah.
I think that's part of what Esther succeeded in creating. That's on one side. On the other side, I think it puts Haman at his disadvantage. He's what's the word that I want? He's not suspecting anything. When he comes home to brag to his family, he says, "I was today by the party with the king and queen, and tomorrow also I'm going to the party with the king and queen." So he thinks he's on top of the world.
So it's to make him take his guard down a bit.
That's right. So I think she's accomplishing both of those things. There may be a third thing also, because she says to the king, "And tomorrow I will do what the king has, according to the king's word," which means to reveal our identity, we said. And she's like building it up. The king is coming to the next day. Wow, it's been years and years. I mean, I've tried every trick that I could think of to find out who she is. Tomorrow, finally, I'm going to have it happen. So he's waiting for that to happen. All this is accomplished by what she's doing. I'm sure there are other things that I don't know about and I haven't thought of, but these are some of the things. Yeah.
I was going to say that in the sense that she's achieving the goal mitzad the king, so if he comes on too strong, it would have defeated the goal mitzad Haman.
Well, she couldn't anticipate
How they're going to
that. She couldn't anticipate that Haman would be coming to the palace to hang Mordechai, and that also the king won't sleep, and that also the history book will be open to the story of Mordechai, and that the king will have a pang of conscience. Oh my gosh, we didn't. She didn't have any of that in mind. She couldn't have known anything about that. All she wanted is that the king should be, like a little detached and puzzled, and so that when she says that he's the villain, he should be somewhat prepared for it. She couldn't have anticipated that dramatic turnaround would happen that night. I think that's right. She couldn't have anticipated that.
Was it only a political reason from Achashverosh's side that he started playing with Haman when he asked Haman for this elaborate description of how to reward this guy? Because there wasn't anything before then. Like the first thing we see of Haman doing something bad in Achashverosh's eyes is when he suggests the crown, right? That the one to be rewarded should wear the crown, right? So is this just something that's going on all the time, and therefore Achashverosh is doing it, or is this something else that happened before?
Well, let's be careful. Haman comes in, The king doesn't know why Haman's coming in. He says, who's in the chutzner? And the servants say, Haman's in the chutzner. They say, okay, let him come in. Now, that's okay. Right. So Haman's coming in to hang Mordechai, but the king doesn't know that. And the king starts right away. What should be done for a man whom the king wants to honor? And he knows what that's going to go through Haman's head. So he's already playing with him. The business with the crown hasn't happened yet. The business with the crown is Haman's answer to the king's question. So that can't be what's triggering the king's playing with him, because that hasn't happened yet. You follow me?
Yes.
Okay. So I think that's why I would trace it back to the fact that Esther invited Haman together with the king to the party, and he's thinking, what is Haman doing there? What is Haman doing there?
So we can attribute this to Esther maybe.
So this way he's pulling him down, you know. Making him honor a Jew, and like that's but that's all. That's all. So that, as far as as far as Haman's concerned, he's trapped. I mean, now that you mention it, I'm just thinking it through. Haman is trapped because he himself said that person, whoever he is, should be honored by one of the king's highest officials. Right? So he's okay. You said it. If he had said a garden should have been planted in his name, you know, with a plaque, this is the guy's garden, then it wouldn't have been able to do it. But now that he himself said one of the highest officials should do it, the king said, okay, you said it, so you do it. Not clear that the king was intending lechatchila to disgrace him to that extent. That you don't have to say. And he was just following what Haman said should be done. Okay, now we talked a little bit about the miracle of Purim, and I want to give you some background because I think this is the main message of the holiday. Is a very profound philosophical message. Miracles are of different types. Even the Rambam discusses this, and he has the same two categories, but he uses them for a different purpose from mine. So I'm not taking the Rambam as a source for my idea. I don't think my idea is. I don't think it's fragile because I think it's just obvious. It's on the surface. I want to start with a review of the miracles in Egypt, the plagues in Egypt. I think the plagues in Egypt are of two different types. Some of the plagues are spectacular breaches with natural law. Spectacular overturning of natural law. 4 out of the 10 fit that description. The river turns to blood. Rivers don't turn to blood. And don't tell me about red algae and so forth and so on. Give me a break. And the hailstones have fire in them. And although I did see that deep sea divers came up from the bed of the sea with methane crystals, and the methane crystals, when you expose them to air on the surface, do burst into flame. So in a certain sense, they're sort of like, but that's not falling from the heavens. That doesn't happen when they fall from the heavens.
And are they cold?
Yeah, deep sea is very cold. So that's number 2. Number 3 is the darkness, which was continuous and palpable. And number 4 is the death of the firstborn. There's no medical condition that attacks firstborn. The other 6 aren't like that at all. The other 6 are natural processes supernaturally enhanced and organized. The natural processes supernaturally enhanced and organized. So, let's take the frogs. Frogs are everywhere. And the waterways of Egypt produce frogs all the time. But this was 1,000 times as much. And when Moses said so. And they disappeared when Moses said so. The frogs that attacked Egypt didn't fall from the sky. They didn't grow out of the flower pots. They came from where frogs always come, from waterways. But it was supernaturally enhanced, and meaning that it was a much greater volume, and also supernaturally organized to be triggered and ended on command. Each of the other 6 plagues have exactly this character. The boils on the fan. I'm not working with Midrash now. Midrash has all sorts of descriptions that aren't naturalistic in the sense that I'm talking about. I'm taking the Pesukim. The boils were boils. The lice were lice. The wild animals that came in out of the hills, they were wild animals. And they lost their fear of human beings and they invaded the habitations. The locusts were locusts. The cattle sickness was cattle sickness, just that, let's say, in an average year, you lose 5% of your herd to cattle sickness. Now you lost them all, on command. So is it a miracle? For sure it's a miracle, but it's not the same kind of miracle. Because it's using a natural process in miraculous fashion. Now, in order to understand the difference philosophically, let's imagine we would talk to an Egyptian and ask him, what is his reaction to these miracles? How does he understand them? How does he think in terms of perhaps reorganizing his thoughts about the world and his thoughts about the Jewish people? What would this cause him to rethink? If you take the 4, which are spectacular breaches of natural order, I think the response of an Egyptian would be this. Well, we've been kicking around the Jews for about 90 years of slavery. They were in Egypt for 210 years, but most of it wasn't slavery. Now, true, we understand that every nation has its patron god, but boy, the Jewish God is either very weak, very inconsequential, or he doesn't like the Jews very much, because we've been kicking them around for 90 years and nobody did anything. He didn't do anything to us. All of a sudden, surprise, surprise, we see now that the Jews have a God, and he's pretty powerful. Indeed, he can attack one of our gods and create an injury. He attacked the Nile turned to blood. Obviously, the Nile is injured, and that's pretty impressive. The same with fiery hail, the same with darkness, the same with death of the firstborn. It seems like the Jewish God can break into nature, break the laws of nature, and make things happen which are against the laws of nature. So now, if I had a view that the Jews' patron God is weak or doesn't like them, I have to revise that. He's not so weak, and he does like them, and he was willing to do things for them. Of course, he has limitations. He has limitations. After all, each plague lasted a week, and then there was 3 weeks off. Resting up, for sure. It takes a lot of effort. And he never hits the Nile again, because you can only sneak up once. Once the Nile knows you're coming, he'll take care to make sure that he can defend himself. So the Jewish God goes to other things, right? Because he knows that only one. This is the way they thought.
90 years to charge.
What's the 90 years?
I'm saying the first 90 years he didn't do anything.
He didn't do anything, right?
So it took he had to really build it up, and then.
But then he takes 3 weeks off in between each Makkah. So fine. So that's how they would have to revise their picture of how the world works. Now you have the other 6, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu uses natural processes in a supernatural fashion. Here, I think the potential challenge to the thought set of a polytheist is much more profound. I'm not saying they all got this, but I'm saying that it's there, and it could have been appreciated at least by some, and probably was appreciated by a lot more of the Jews. And that is, when you're a polytheist and you have many gods, each function in nature is attended to by one God. You don't have two gods of the sun, or two gods of the sea, or two gods of death, or two gods of victory, or two gods of life, or two gods of love. No, it doesn't work that way. One is fine. One is enough. Okay, now, who makes the frogs? Oh, who makes the frogs? The god of the frogs, whatever it is, the nymph of the frogs, whatever it is, that's the one that's in charge of fertility of the frogs. Okay, but for 1 week, for sure, it was the Jewish God. That's for sure. Because it happened when Moses said and ended when Moses said, and it was more spectacular than it ever had been before. That week was for sure done by the Jewish God. Now what are we supposed to say? Supposed to say that, well, you see, the rest of the time there's the other God of the frogs, right? And then this time it was the Jewish God, and then when he took off, the other God went back to work. Two gods for one function? You don't have that. You don't have that. So maybe you could have a sneaky idea. Maybe the Jewish God's doing it all the time. Maybe he's doing it all the time. And all the rest of the time he did it in what we consider to be a naturalistic fashion. And this time he did it in a different way. And he's in charge of it. That would be a natural thought. And now you have 6 examples. The frogs and the lice and the boils and the wild animals and the cattle sickness and the blowing of the wind to bring in the locusts and take the locusts out. That's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of nature. You might begin to get the feeling that maybe the Jewish God is not just a power that can interfere with nature. Maybe the Jewish God is behind nature also. And that's why it's not interference. There's no competition. There's no overcoming. There's no resistance. Because he's doing the whole thing. This would be a very, very radical attack on the polytheistic idea of how the world runs. It would be pushing in the direction of monotheism. And I think that these are 2 messages that are transmitted by the plagues for the Jewish people. Both are necessary, obviously, because it's not enough to acknowledge that you have a God among many. By the way, our friends, the scholars, the academic scholars, have created a word for this. It's henotheism, H-E-N-O, theism. Henotheism means, I'm not prejudiced, there are lots of gods, I pledge allegiance to one. But for all I know, there are other gods as well. I just don't worship them. And they want to push that into the early Jewish people as if to say there's no statement of monotheism as a description of the world. It's just we have chosen to worship only this God. Okay, that's their fantasies. Yeah.
From the perspective of a standard polytheist, wouldn't it be just as problematic to their worldview? Meaning, which way do we go? Between saying that there's 2 gods over one thing, or one God over many things. Meaning, when they saw a new thing, so that must mean that there was a new God in the world. Are they both contradictions to their Iker philosophy? I don't think so.
It's a good question. It's a good question, but I don't think so because
we could say one God is the king God, and he could tell the lower God do something. So it's not him. That would be more consistent with their philosophy, I would think.
It would certainly be more consistent with their practice. But the question is the relative displacement of their philosophy. If you say that one God does many things, or you say that many gods do one thing. Many guys doing two gods doing the same thing is just redundant. That one God could do several things, why should a God be one-dimensional? Why would that be necessary? Why would that be? It's just convenient because the things that are being done are very different from one another, and they don't look connected to one another. And by the way, I think that the polytheistic picture is much more natural than the monotheistic picture. The things that happen in the world are just, it seems impossible to relate them to one another. The sun shines, the wind blows, the tides go in and out. You have seasons. The grass grows and the grass dies, and birds lay eggs, and dogs and cats give life to. Is there any reason to think this is all under a single control that's manifesting such different phenomena? Some are very regular. They're exactly regular. They happen exactly the same way over and over again without any variation whatsoever. Some vary a little bit here and there, and some seem to be completely random. So I think the picture of many different controls is a much more natural picture. But it isn't necessary. All you want is there should be control, in particular intelligent control. If you had one that did, well, I'm trying to think if there is an example that I know of where a God does more than one thing. I'm not sure that I know. I mean, and it's also probably based on the fact that in human society you have specialization.
Right, they saw what they saw, and they
That's
reflected
right.
it above.
That's right. Yeah.
About polytheism, there's more than one God. Does that idea stem from the fact that there's one major God and then there's sub-gods? Because then why don't they get into fights, and how do they agree? And are they only in charge of water, but water has waterfalls, they have rivers on land, and then there's ponds, and then there's rain. You know what I mean?
So both questions are good questions. I'm not now going to quote what the historians and anthropologists say, because I think they're incompetent. The Rambam says explicitly what you said. There was a time, starting from Adam, everybody knew there was a creator.
Right.
And then that got watered down. The Rambam in Hilchos Avodah Zarah says, because the first thought was, well, yes, there's a creator, but he created the world in such a way that certain things have power. Certain things...
Is that not true?
Well, one second.
Okay.
Slow down. He created things that have power, and he wants them to exercise that power. I'm cheating with the word vocabulary now. He wants them to do what they do, to exercise that power, to make the world do what he wants to be done. So he's like a king who appoints a governor over a province, and the governor runs the province the way the king wants it run. The king doesn't do everything hands-on with in all the individual things that go on. And then the next thought was, well, like with the governor of the province, you don't go to the king for everything. You may go to the king for big issues that affect the whole kingdom. But if you want a license for a barbershop, you go to the governor. You don't go to the king for that. And then you need the governor to interact with you in a favorable way. So it might be nice to butter him up from time to time, leave a few presents on his doorstep, and a few bribes and so forth and so on. So then you get the idea of interacting with the lower ones and offering them something in recognition and asking them for help and so forth and so on. And then little by little, the function of the creator is pushed higher and higher out of the world. And then they lose sight of the creator, and then comes polytheism. Although some say that in the ancient world, even the polytheists still had a concept of a creator. They didn't abandon it entirely, but it became less and less functional because you're dealing with the local police. So that is the idea that the Rambam says. That's how polytheism came into the world.
It does make sense on that level, but only because we're looking at it from a human point of view toward a godly point of view. But we're not. If we start with a godly point of view, which we can't necessarily have and maintain a godly point of view, which is above time and above that there's no concept of time. There's no concept of can or cannot do. It's a matter of existence.
No, but that you can't do
because you can't, because we're all human.
I don't think. I'm just going to make a remark here because I want to go on to finish what I'm talking about. But the Torah gives us two pictures. Pray to Kadosh Baruch Hu if you need rain. If he's above time and above space and above human beings and absolute and unchanging, it's hard to get into your head that I should pray to him to bring rain.
Right.
So the Torah gives us two pictures, and if you're very sophisticated and philosophical, you can make sense out of the two pictures together. And if you're not, you're just told, use both pictures. Use both pictures and live with it.
It's lahavdil. If you wanted something from Amazon, you call up representative. But if you grew up with Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, you could call him up and be like, I'm having a problem, and he would fix
Yeah,
it.
but no one's going to suggest that Jeff Bezos is outside of time and outside of space and imperfect
Right.
and unchanging.
Right, but he has thousands of
But so what?
employees,
But so what?
He's
But-
giving you a direct line.
Yeah, but so what? The point is there's no contradiction there. Here there's a contradiction.
Oh.
If he's absolutely unchanging, how's he going to give me rain now that he didn't give me yesterday? Right? People are going to worry about that.
True.
So, okay. I'm just saying, what we say to most people is live with it. Live with it. Huh? You know, in fact, I'll give you a simple example. This table is solid, right? Now I tell you, it's almost all empty space. You don't understand that.
Because it feels solid.
Because it feels solid, right? You don't understand that. So, well, live with it. The fact is, it's almost all empty space, and it feels solid, and if you can't understand how that could be, too bad. Not that no one understands, they do understand. But
It is, but how we interact with it, it doesn't feel solid. It doesn't feel mostly empty space.
more than that, I mean, you would never guess that it was so. If you didn't hear it,
Only because it's such a small picture. This building is mostly empty space, but if you walk into the building, it'll
but come on, that's changing the subject. I'm talking about the table.
Right, okay.
Talking about the table, right? Okay, let's get back to work. So now that's the miracles that took place in Egypt. Now I think that Purim is another stage on this road of miracles. Let me put in something. Putting something here. The word for miracle in Hebrew is nes. The word nes refers to miracle, refers to a flagpole, and refers to a test. Do they have anything in common? Miracle, flagpole, and test? It might depend upon how you think about miracles. Let's start with test. What does a test do? A test reveals something that's hidden. See my clay pots? My clay pots are very strong. You buy my clay pots, you've got a lifetime purchase. And the customer says, what? It's just clay. Not my clay. Watch. I hold it up, I take a hammer, bang! Nothing. Not even a dent. See, my pots are very strong. What does the test do? The test reveals to you the strength of my pot. You can't tell that by looking at it. You don't know. When I do the test, I show you the strength of the pot. That's what tests are in school, right? Your teacher can't open your cranium and read your brain.
Yeah.
Did you? Yeah. They can't do it. He doesn't know what you learned and what you understand. He gives you a test to get a symptom of what you understand and what you know. That's what a test does, okay? Meaning, here's the punchline, meaning, usually, the point of the test is not the test. The point of the test is to reveal something that I need to know. There's no point in banging the pot with a hammer. I'm not trying to make noise. The pot rings with a beautiful note like crystal. No, I'm showing what's there. Same thing is true with your test papers, right? After the test is over and you get a grade, you throw them away because you're not mechadish anything. You're not going to publish them. They're just useful as for the teacher to get a picture of what's going on in your mind. That's the test. Now, what is a flagpole? Well, what do flags do? Flags identify things. Nations have flags, states have flags, post offices have flags because it's a government building. In war, in ancient times, where war was on the ground, each side had a flag because if you are in a battle and you need to get back to your side and it's disorienting and there's dust and everything else, I want to get back to their side, I'll be dead. So where's my side? Oh, there's my flag. That's my side. Flags identify something. They're not objets d'art. They're not artistic creations which you put in a museum and meditate on. The job of the flag as a piece of cloth is to identify what it's attached to. So these, the flagpole and a test have something in common. Their job is to reflect on something else. Not just to be what they are, but to reflect on something else, to identify something else. Okay, if I try to apply this to a nace, to a miracle, what do I get? A miracle is an event. The event attracts attention. And indeed, the event has something to teach. I wouldn't dismiss it, it isn't as trivial as a piece of cloth, or as trivial as banging the hammer with the pot with a hammer. But the event doesn't exhaust the meaning. It doesn't exhaust the communication. There's more going on than just that. Let's consider the 6 types of makos in Egypt. It's not just that they were hit these 6 times. It's that the way they were hit, the way the makos took place, causes me to reflect, maybe nature isn't what I thought. Maybe nature, which is not miraculous, isn't what I thought. Maybe it's under Kodesh Baruch Hu's control also. So the way in which this miracle took place forces me to think about the non-miraculous in a new way. I think that suggestion, and I didn't make up this idea about Nace. I learned it from I forget who I learned this from. Maybe it was with Hirsch, because he works very much with vocabulary. So now, Purim, I think, takes this to another degree. When we learned the Megillah together, we pointed out that if you had been present, let's say you were following the events, you're living in Persia, in Shushan. There's the party and the drunkenness and the riches and everything else, and then there's Vashti's rebellion, and the king is under strain, and they give it a spin, and they get rid of Vashti. Would you have thought that was a miracle? Would you have seen God's hand in this service? Now, let me just make clear what I'm asking. I'm not asking about your beliefs. I'm talking about what you see. Could you have said to somebody, look at this great miracle that took place? I don't think so. He's an oriental potentate, and he's a zhlub. He's a physical, and he has ideas, and he makes mistakes, and he made a mistake when he was drunk. This is the kind of thing that happens. It's the kind of thing that happens in Goyish history. And it happened. I don't think anybody would see it as some kind of miracle. Esther's chosen as queen. Well, somebody had to be chosen. And since, by the way, there were over 1,000 girls, right? It was 4 years that this was going on. 1 girl per night. Any girl who'd be chosen is 1 out of 1,000. That doesn't make it miraculous. The fact that the probability is very low doesn't make it miraculous. Think about that. What you want to know is, how do you explain why an event with low probability happened? Sometimes the answer is, I have a machine. I have a machine that makes low probability events. That machine is called a lottery. The lottery guarantees that you will have a very low probability event. The fact that it's low probability doesn't mean it's miraculous. So, no one's going to say that because she was chosen, Esther was chosen, that has to be a miracle. Mordechai overhears the plot against the king's life, and he tells Esther, and Esther tells the king, and the king life is saved. Well, there are plots against kings all the time, and most times they're discovered, because if they weren't, it would hardly pay to be king, because you have a very short life. He didn't reward Mordechai, so we talked about that. Mordechai's a Jew, and the Jews have no province, they have no state, they're scattered, they're despised, they're on the bottom of society. So all these events we would regard as natural. Now, when you get to the end of the story, 2 things happen. Events take place which are so improbable, and there's no engine making them happen, that you see right away that that's divine providence. The fact that Mordechai is coming in to kill Haman, I'm sorry, the other way around. Haman's coming in to kill Mordechai, and the king wants to reward Mordechai. And he gets the complete opposite. And she's queen right there to be able to plead on behalf of the Jewish people. That you see as already divine providence. But then you have to think, how did those things happen? Where did they come from? Well, there was the party, and Vashti rebelled, right? And there was the plot, and Mordechai was there. Aha, so maybe the party with Vashti rebelling and getting thrown out wasn't just accidental. Wasn't just the meanderings of Oriental politics and Oriental monarchy. And maybe the idea that Mordechai was there to overhear in Bigshon and Zeresh plotting the assassination of the king wasn't just accidental. So what this teaches you is the things you thought were purely natural and accidental, maybe they aren't. Maybe they aren't. Here you have, again, the same message, nace as a miracle which teaches you about the non-miraculous. But here it teaches you in a more profound way. Because it's not the miracle teaching you about the background of events similar to the miracle. Here it's the whole history behind the miracle. And the whole history is what you yourself experienced. You experienced it as natural, and then you have to change your mind and say, no, it's divine providence. That's a very profound change. So I think that the miracle in the Megillah is a further step on this progress of the miracles revealing what the real quality of nature is. Now, Megillah is step 3, and then Hanukkah is step 4. Yeah.
At what point do you draw the line and say this is not just low probability? And I'm not using your term of nace as a revelation of past events. I'm using it as a term of a form of a supernatural presence.
Yeah.
At what point do you draw the line of saying that no, it's true, it's a low chance that she was chosen to be queen and that he overheard the plot, but that they connected the two events happening simultaneously, but that had a supernatural backing. How do you draw the line between saying that this is low probability and that's a supernatural? Is there a definite line, or can you just say that this is such a small chance?
No, you can't say that. What you have to do is say what I said before. When an event of very low probability takes place, one guy in some place in America just won $10 million from the lottery the second time.
Right.
He won it 3 years ago, and he won it again. The question is always, what mechanism do you have to explain why the event took place? You can make a lottery as improbable as you like, just sell more tickets. 1 million, 1 billion, 10 billion, you can make it as improbable as you like. Right? That doesn't make it more miraculous. She was getting less and less probable. Maybe it's bordering on the miraculous. No, because I know how it happened. I know why it happened. It happened because you sold a lot of tickets. That's all. So it's perfectly naturalistic.
What happened because you sold a lot of tickets?
That an event of very low probability took place. One ticket won the lottery. Just one. What was the probability that ticket would win? 1 in 10 million. Or 1 in 20 million, because people buy more than one ticket. Right? You can make it happen in naturalistic terms. That's certainly not a miracle. Not even close to a miracle. The fact that it's less and less probable doesn't make it close to a miracle. The question is, how do you explain it?
So how do you explain Esther being chosen? Because someone's got to be picked?
Someone has to be picked. He's looking for a queen. He's not going to do this forever. And
that's like saying someone has to win the lottery, but someone
does.
Correct. That's correct. Quite correct.
No, there's some lotteries that people don't win because they keep drawing it until someone wins.
Fine, but when that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. The question is when this person wins, and it's 1 in 10 billion. Does that make this person's winning in this case into a miracle? Right? And the answer is no, because we know how it happened. We know how the low probability event was manufactured. We know how that was done. Right?
Because it's going to happen even if it didn't happen yet. But the fact that these two events happening at the same time, he was disturbed in his sleep and he was trying to kill Mordecai, and then meeting, since that is not manufactured, that's
right.
Made. They could have missed each other by 10 seconds.
Right.
You see, that's a different kind of low probability.
That's right. The question is only how do you explain it? How do you explain it? Right? Here you have an automatic explanation. There's a wonderful book by a fellow named David Hand, who's a professor of statistics in London, called "Why Miracles Happen Every Day." That's the subtitle of the book. What's the title of the book? I don't remember. I once studied that book with a friend. We asked him questions and so on, because we think we have some things that can't be explained. Okay. So now, I just want to tell you how the end of the story goes, and that's with Hanukkah. Hanukkah is really even a step further. I'm trying to remember now. I had an insight this Hanukkah. Hope I haven't forgotten it. Now, the Maharal says that the war against the Greeks was purely naturalistic. There were no miracles at all. Earth didn't open up to swallow the Greek soldiers. No boulders from heaven fell down on them. The Jews didn't grow to 10 amas tall, 20, 30 feet tall, and beat them all up. No. If you had been attached to them, you would have seen it as a guerrilla war. Guerrilla wars, often, the smaller and less well-trained army defeats the bigger army. Ask the Americans about Vietnam. Ask the British about the province called America. I hope we'll be able to ask the Russians about Ukraine also, the same way.
Or the Russians about the Finns.
Sorry?
The Russians about Finland earlier.
Oh, Finland? Okay, right. This does happen. It's not something which is impossible to happen. Then you have the miracle of the oil. That's an open miracle. And what the Maharal says is, the function of the miracle of the oil is to teach you that the war was also divine providence. And he brings a riot to this, which is to me, is really astonishing. If you look in the entire liturgy of Hanukkah, the miracle of the oil is not mentioned anywhere. It's not mentioned in Al Hanisim. It's not even mentioned in Haneres Halolu, which you say before you light the menorah, which is to commemorate the miracle of the oil, but it's not mentioned. Milchamos, it says, wars. It doesn't say anything about the miracle of the oil. So the Maharal says the liturgy is to teach you, don't get lost in the oil. These are my words, obviously. Don't get lost in the oil. Yes, the miracle of the oil is a miracle. And yes, it's meant to teach you things. And yes, we celebrate it and so on and so on. That's quite true, but don't get lost. Don't get lost. The bigger picture is that the miracle of the oil is to teach you about the war. Now, I'm forgetting now. I have one riot to it, which I said for many years. I published it many years ago. But I had two more riots this year that I didn't have before. So, I'll just tell you the one that I published. It's really a prima Gottleib. I didn't know it at the time. The Beis Yosef asks a famous question. If you found one night's worth of oil and it burned for 8 nights, how many nights of miracle do you have?
7.
Right? You could very well say 7. That's the Beis Yosef's kasha. So why do we light 8 candles? That's one problem. The other problem is this. The Rambam says that they retook the temple, came to chase the Greeks out and reoccupy it on the 25th of Kislev. Okay, they came in on the 25th of Kislev, they cleaned it out, they set it up, and lit the menorah. When do you light the menorah?
24th.
When do you light the menorah every day?
At night.
At night.
Close to night.
So when you light it at night, it's burning on the 26th. The 26th. Why do we light it on the night of the 25th? It's one day too early. The answer to both questions is that the first night you're lighting in commemoration for the victory. And the other 7 nights you're lighting for the 7 nights miraculous expansion of the oil to burn.
Even though the victory hadn't happened yet?
Well, the whole purpose of the war was to reoccupy the temple and to be able to do the avodah the way you wanted to. It was the abominations that the Greeks did in the temple, which triggered the popular sentiment, starting with the Kohanim, the Maccabim, who were Kohanim, and leading. That was the abomination that triggered the war. Of course, the war went on because it was going from south to north, and chased them and back out. But taking the temple and reestablishing the avodah in the appropriate way was the prize. That's what they were looking for. Because Baruch Hu immediately gave them this miracle to crown their efforts and to show them that what they were doing was correct, and that he was there. But now, one second. Let me get this straight. I had 2 new rayas this year. I was very happy that I found them. That the oil was meant to teach about the war. Well, okay. I remember one of them, I think. Let's suppose they hadn't found any pure oil. What would they have done?
Use tummy oil.
Use tummy oil. You don't have to have pure oil. Pure oil is only the best way to do it. Now let's say the Goyim have captured the temple and they're committing atrocities in the temple. Do you have to risk your life?
No.
To recover the temple? No, you do not. There's no such rule, no such law. They acted in a way that's above and beyond your responsibilities to recapture the temple, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave them an ace so that they could do the mitzvah of the oil in a way that's above and beyond your responsibilities. There's a 1-for-1 there. Someone who knows what's going on thinks, okay, we did this, which was above and beyond, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us a miracle, which is to enable us to do it above and beyond. That's not an accident. When you look at that, there's a hatama, where there's a correspondence between what you were doing and what you were given. So that also, they could see that the oil was meant to reflect on the war. That was one. There was another one. Think for a second. Another hatama. The Kohanim were the ones who started the war, and it's the Kohanim who are going to do the service in the temple. It's the Kohanim who are going to light the menorah, even though Chadlok Ksher Bazar, but it wasn't done that way. So the war was started by Kohanim, and the result was that in the service of the Kohanim, that something special happened. If you're looking at it carefully, you could see that the miracle reflects the character of the war. And that being the case, something which is now physically disconnected in a way. But you can see that the oil is supposed to teach you that the war was also divine providence. This is, I think, the end in this chain of these lessons. This is the most abstract of the lessons, but it all carries the same meaning. Yeah.
You said that. You said that when it comes to the reason why we light on the night and it's not the day before, it's because we're celebrating the taking of it, and then
we do light the night before. We do light the night before.
And then the fact that we light before is because we're celebrating the taking of the Mishkan, and then then also the miracle of the oils is the 7 days. But I think that's just one opinion.
Yes, it's one opinion. I agree.
There's like many others to that specific answer.
Yeah, 300 terutzim to the Beis Yosef's kasha. That's what they say. There's a whole sefer about it. Okay, fine. Just using this as background for the idea, and that background for the idea fits the thing that I want to tell you. So the bottom line is that there's this general feature of the miracle calls attention to something that's above and beyond the actual event of the miracle. And in the case of the 6 plagues in Egypt and Purim and Hanukkah, it's all reflecting on what we think of as natural, as being divine providence. It's a long series of events teaching the same message in different contexts. I think that's very important.